Welcome back. So in this lesson, we're going to look at player combat. So if we press the square button, we can see homework kick. And if we go up to some objects like this tree and we kick it, it explodes. Also, if we go up to one of these boxes and kick it, it explodes and coins fall out. So of course, as always, we're going to go to maximum. Let's just type in kick and let's look for the animation that suits. I think a few of these here are too exaggerated for what we want. We want something a little more subtle. Maybe something like this. This is a zombie kick though. There's too much recoil here, so let's see if we can find a better one. I think this one looks better. Still a bit more of a fighter pose, but I think that's the best we'll get. So of course, as always, download. We'll change the FBX for Unity. Download with skin, and then download. Now let's jump to Unity. So let's just drag and drop our animation into our animations folder. And we go on it, and we say right. Change that to humanoid. Apply. Expand this out. Click the animation. Control D. Then we can delete the model. Now let's look at the animation. Drag and drop modeling so we can see it better. That looks good. So maybe we'll just back the root transform in the pose. And we'll back the Y in the pose as well. And let's change this to original. So it's more front facing. And we'll just back the X and Z position as well. I think that looks good. So let's click our player model. So we have the correct animator selected. And let's just drag and drop our kicking. Let's go to the base layer first and then kicking. When the player's done kicking, we'll just transition back into our normal locomotion state. Make sure we have exit time enabled. And at the moment it's 0.88. See what that looks like. We could probably increase that. So let's say 0.75 is our exit time. Or we'll change this to 1 actually, so we have the full. Actually, no, let's go back to 0.75 and let's just make the transition longer. Maybe 0.5. See how this looks. Yeah, I think that should be good. At a high level, what we're going to do is we're going to write some code that when the square button is pressed, then we go to the kicking animation, and then once that's done, we just go back into our locomotion and normal movement. But we want to make sure we can't actually walk or run when we're in the kicking animation. So now that we're here, let's just add a new boolean, call it is interacting. And then if we go to our locomotion state, let's click the state and then go add behavior. We're going to create a new script. We're just going to call it change build status as it's showing up here. Add that. And the reason we're adding it that way instead of through our scripts is it's going to come with some template code we're going to use. Let's double click to open this. As we can see, we got all these methods that are commented out. We're just going to use a few of them. First, let's add some variables. So public string, and it's going to be bool name. And then we're also going to add another one too that will be helpful in future if we need it. Simply going to be public bool, let's call it reset on exit. And we're also going to have another bool, another public bool. That's going to be the status of this. So bool status. Let's just uncomment this. And let's just remove this line too because we don't need it. And on enter state, all we're going to say is animator dot set bool, and it's going to be our bool name, and it's going to equal our bool status. Simple as that. Now if we go down to our on exit state, we'll uncomment that, and then we'll say if reset on exit. Then we're going to do exactly this, but we're going to make it not the bool status, so the opposite. So we're resetting. Okay, just take this away and clean it up. And we don't need anything else. Let's just remove all these comments and these extra methods that we don't need. And that should be it. Let's remove these. Now if we go back to our animator, we'll see now we have this. So our bool name we're going to change is as interacting. And we know that when we're in the locomotion state, is interacting should be false. So we'll just let this stay unticked. And it's not going to be reset and exit either. Okay, time to start doing some coding. Let's go to our scripts, go to our player, and open our player controller. Now let's just create a new method. Let's do it here. And say void handle kicking. And then we want to play or target animation. So let's actually create another method for that because we might reuse this later. So void play target anim, and of course we'll need to take in the animation name. So string anim name, and we also want to know if is interacting will be true or false. So bool is interacting, and then let's add some crossfade time too. So float cross feed time. let's just default that to 0.25f, so we don't always need to provide it. Now, simply, we'll say animator dot crossfade. Let's go fix delta time. I've tested before with crossfade, and I've used that in projects before and I had no issues, but while testing this, I had some issues with the animation being slower at times. So if we use the fixed time, it'll work consistently the same every time. So we're going to use this. We'll put in the anim name and our crossfade time. To set the as interacting, we'll say animator dot set bool, and the bool is called is interacting. We'll let it equal is interacting. So let's just add that bool to the script as well. So let's go here and let's just create a new header. Call it flags. And our new flag is going to be serialized field bool is interacting. Now, we don't really need to serialize it, but I like to because I want to see it in the inspector sometimes to know if the player is in his interacting state or not. And also, we should actually capture this on each frame, so we're actually getting the value from this from the animator itself. So we'll say is interacting equals animator dot get bool is interacting. Simply, we'll leave it like that. Now, if we remember, we said we don't want the character to move when he is interacting. So we'll just say if not is interacting. And I think we also don't want rotation to be applied. So let's include this. We want gravity to still be applied, animations, and check for door. We can move that up as well. We don't want that running if he's interacting. Okay, that was good. Let's go back down to our handle kicking and let's actually flesh this out. So we'll say play target anim. And our animation is, I think it's called kicking. And we want as interacting to be true. Now, if we go back up to our player update, now the conditions for being allowed to kick will be if the player is not is interacting and input container dot x input dot pressed, then we can say handle kicking. Okay, so let's just go back to our game. I think we can test this now. Press play. So our player moves as normal. So now if we press the square, we go into kicking. Yep, that works good. And it doesn't matter if we're idle, it works the same. Perfect. But at the moment, there's no collision on this. If I come over here and I kick, nothing happens. And we have nothing to actually interact with our kicking. So let's go to our asset pack we have, the polygon starter. Let's go to our prefabs. Now if we scroll down here, we actually have this model for a crate, just like the game. Let's drag and drop that into the scene and let's unpack the prefab, unpack completely. And let's just rename this as crate. Now let's just go in here and bring it a little bit higher so it's ground level, and then let's just pull it away from the player a little bit, maybe just here off to the side. And if we remember, when we kicked the crate, we had some effects too, some coins that spilled out of it, so we can actually do that quite easily. If we right click on the crate, we go down here and say effects particle system, and this is called as coins, and we can see these particles going in this direction. So we want the coins to spill out from the top. So let's go to shape and we'll change the rotation of the X to -90. So now it's going up, and we can actually change the cone radius as well. It's too big. Let's make it more in line with the size of the crate. Let's go 0.5 maybe. Let's also bring this up to the top of the crate. So 0.5 on the Y. Now if we add some gravity, we'll see these particles start falling like we do with the coins. So let's go gravity modifier. Let's start increasing this. Let's do 1. Okay, but let's change these particles to actually be the coins. And luckily enough, this asset pack also contains a model for a coin. So instead of going to prefabs folder, let's go to our models folder and let's find that coin mesh. So here it is here. So now if we go back to our particle system, and if we go down to renderer, we can change this from render mode from billboard to mesh, and then let's apply the coin mesh. And now for the material, we'll use the material that comes with the pack. Okay, so that didn't work. We have got cube here. We didn't apply that properly. So let's go to models again, find our coin model. We actually need to expand this. It's this one we need to use. And there we go. We've got coins coming out. Let's just make this more like the game. So first, it does not loop in the game. The duration, I think we could just set that to something very short, maybe 0.5 second. If we play, Yeah, that's not enough coins, so let's increase the number. Let's go to mission, let's change this from 10 to, let's say, 50. Now you press play. That looks good. Maybe bring the coins out a bit faster. So if we go to start speed, let's change this to 8, see how it looks. Okay, so now maybe they're going a bit too high up, so maybe increase the gravity modifier to 2. I think that looks good, but of course, if we actually go up and kick this with our player, this isn't going to work, that's not going to trigger. So what we need to do now is actually add a damage collider to our player, and then we also need to add a component to this crate that can receive damage. So let's do that first. If we go to our scripts, let's go to our tools folder, and let's create a new script, and we'll call this interfaces. Let's open that, and then in here, we can delete all this, and we're going to say public interface, and this one is going to be called damageable. So this is how interfaces work. Usually when I start it with an I, just so you know it's an interface, and then any class that implements this interface will need to implement this method. So we'll say public void on damage, and that's it. Let's remove this stuff if we're not using it. Now, let's actually use this interface on the crate. So let's go to our scripts again. Let's create a new folder for props. So props, go here, create a new C# script called crate. And as we said, it's going to implement the damageable interface. So we just right click, quick actions and refactoring, and implement interface. Now let's remove these other methods for now until we're ready for them. Also remove this stuff if we don't need it. And we're going to make the crate have a health. So int health. And I think in the game we've seen that it took 3 hits for it to be destroyed. Let's just say health equals 3 by default. And then on damage, we should actually take in the damage amount. So if we go back to our interfaces, let's just say here, int damage amount. If we go to our crate script, we need to add damage amount in here now. So int damage amount, and we'll just say health minus equals damage amount. And now if health is less than or equal to 0, then we want to hide this game object. So game object that set active false. We also want the particle system to play every time that this object gets hit. So let's go particle system. Let's capture that variable, and yeah, let's call particle system, and we can get this on the start. So particle system equals get component in children particle system, and then when on damage is played, we'll say particle system dot play. And then just before we set the object as inactive, if the health is less than or equal to 0, let's say particle system dot transform dot parent equals null. So we make it so it's not under the game object we're about to set active to false, and then we set active to false. So we get a warning here saying that this hides an inherited member. Let's just change this. Let's rename this to coin particles, and that should be good. Now let's go apply this to the crate, add the crate script. And there we go. But again, this won't work until we add a damage collider to our player. So let's do that right now. Go to our player, and all simply is going to be is a empty game object. Let's call it damage collider, and it's just going to be a box collider. Let's bring it up a bit, maybe to about here at its feet. Now, let's actually drag and drop this damage collider under our model. So now if we click the model, we can go to this animation tab. We can view the kicking animation, and now we know where we want our damage collider to actually be. So this is the leg fully extended. So let's make sure our damage collider is a bit forward. So let's actually just do it through the component and not through the transform. So let's make that 0, and then let's bring it up on the Y to maybe about there, maybe about 0.75. Let's bring it forward on the Z. Let's make sure we're looking directly at the side, and let's be generous and bring it a little bit ahead of the foot. So yeah, maybe 0.35. I think that looks good. Now if we look at the front view, I think this is probably a bit too wide. So let's change the size on the X, bring it in a bit, maybe 0.25. Now I think that looks good. So basically when we play this animation, we want this box to enable. and then anything that collides with it or is inside of it will apply damage to. So let's make sure this is actually going to be a trigger. And now let's create a script for this. Let's go to our scripts folder again, and I think we can add this to our tools. Create C# script. Let's call it damage collider. Let's open this up, delete this stuff for now. Now let's just capture the damage we're going to inflict. So serialize field, let's make an integer and say damage. And let's just default it to 1 maybe. And then we're also going to collect the collider attached to this game object. So collider, let's call this call. Now on the start, we'll say collider equals get component collider. And let's just add a require component here too, so we don't ever set this wrong. Type of collider. And now if we say on trigger enter, so we want this one. Let's make sure that this doesn't trigger on ourself. Our player won't have an on damage at the moment, but let's future proof ourselves and let's make sure the player can't damage himself. So if other dot game object dot layer is equal to this game object dot layer, then we can simply return, and then we'll capture the damageable component from the object we collided with. So we'll say I damageable, let's call it damageable equals other dot game object dot get component damageable. And then if damageable is not equal to null, we'll say damageable dot on damage, and then we'll just put in our damage. Delete this stuff. Now if we go back to our game, I think we can actually test this now. Select our damage collider. Let's add the damage collider script. Let's make sure it's on the same layer as our player, and we have one already set. So one thing we'll have to add to is a rigid body, because collisions won't work properly unless at least one of the objects has a rigid body. Of course our player uses a character controller, so let's just go to our create. Let's add a rigid body, and we can just make it as kinematic so we have no physics going on. So let's just play a game. Let's just play it in focus mode. Now by default this will be turned on. So that plays on wake, we can change that. If we walk close, it triggers it. And if we go up again, it disappears. But we're not kicking, and the reason that is because at the moment we just have the damage collider always to be active. So let's change that, and we'll change that through the animator itself and through the animation. So if we remember before to one of our previous episodes, on the NPC model we have this animator hook. We're going to add this to the player model as well. So player model and then animator hook. Let's just double click to open this. Now we're going to add a new boolean. Let's say bool damage collider status. Now let's just create a few methods here to set this. So public void open damage collider, and then our damage collider status will be true, and then we'll just have another method for close. So public void close damage collider, and then that's just going to be the opposite. So damage collider status equals false. We're also want to be able to retrieve this value, so let's just rename this to underscore damage collider, and then we'll create a public variable, public bool damage collider status, and then we'll add a get method that returns the damage collider status. And I won't have a set method, so we can just remove this. Now if we go back to our player script, we'll add this animator now. So just on our animator, let's go animator hook. Let's just name it animator hook. And on our player init, after we get the animator, let's just say animator hook equals get component in children, animator hook. Now let's add some methods to our damage collider to actually enable or disable the collider. So let's just say public void collider status, and we'll just take in a boolean called status, and then simply we'll say collider dot enable equals status. Now if we go back to our player controller, let's just get our damage collider. So let's create a new header. Let's call this actions, And maybe we'll just put this above the flags and make sure the flags are the last thing exposed in the inspector. And then we'll have a serialized field, damage collider, and then on our update then what we'll say is damage collider dot collider status will be our animator hook dot damage collider status. Now if we go back, go to our player, make sure we have everything filled out. So now we need to drag and drop our damage collider into this parameter. Now if we click on our model again, go to your animations and let's look at the kicking animation. I think we want it to be active from here. So if we go here, add event, function, we go from our animator hook, methods, open, damage collider status, and then we want to close the damage collider at say about here. So then we just add a new event, and this time we're going to select the close damage collider method. Okay, let's just save all this and let's test this now. So let's just change that quickly too. If we go to our crate and our coins, we'll see an option here that says play on wake. Let's just disable that. Now if we play again, the crate's fine. Let's go up. Our damage collider is set off. Let's kick it. And the coins come out. And the box disappears. I think we can actually speed up the kicking animation a little bit. So let's just go to our animator, kicking, and let's change the speed to, let's try 2. Maybe too fast, but let's see how it goes. Yeah, maybe a bit too quick now. So maybe let's go 1.5. Yeah, I think that looks better. And of course we can't move or rotate while we're interacting. And if we go up to the box and we kick, coins come out. And if we kick for the 3rd time, it finally is destroyed. So that'll do it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. I think this was a fun one. Now in our next lesson, we're actually going to look at some NPC logic for on damage. So as you know in the game, if you kick a player, they start to roll over on the ground. So that's what we're going to do next. So it should be another fun episode. So make sure you subscribe for that. And thank you for watching.